Let's get to the individual awards here.
Let's do it.
Okay, we're going to start at the top. And I think, our goal here is to get it right and not to be like, you could throw a dark horse in there or whatever, but like, let's keep track. And at the end of the year, we can revisit our predictions and see who was right. So we're going to go for some of these are going to be fairly obvious. Don't have to go against the grain. And I'm not going to at MVP. I'm going to go with Lamar. That was my vote last year. I'm assuming it's going to be the same group of guys that are in that mix this year, maybe like a Jaden Daniels, who could be a dark horse to enter that conversation this season, I think. But Lamar has gotten better and better every single year that he's been in the league. I think that that's going to continue to happen this year. I think that they're going to win games. You've already indicated that you agree with that. And I think that since the MVP went to Josh last year, when it was super tight and you're like splitting hairs between them statistically, maybe Lamar has an edge if things are tight again this year. I think all of these awards are narrative awards, and you have to think strategically about how voters will vote and what will matter to them, what will move the needle. And so I'm keeping that in mind with regards to every single projection that I'm making, including this one.
Yeah, I think this is the 06 Manning year for Lamar. I think this is the year that they get over the hump. I think they win the Super Bowl. I think the team looks great. I think Zay Flowers all of a sudden looks like a top-tier wide receiver. The tight ends play well. The offensive line plays well, and the defense comes together. I think this is the year, especially given like quietly Lamar's kind of changed how he plays. He is still like the high rate scrambler, but not quite to the degree that he was in his earlier year. He's really more of an effective passer. And even if he is a creative or freestyle passer, he's still looking to pass the ball down the field. And I think this is the year it comes together for them. I think my dark horse is Brock Purdy. I think that's the dark horse this year. I think a couple things go wrong in the AFC, and all of a sudden we can see Purdy being the type of kind of Shanahan quarterback that Matt Ryan was during his MVP season. And that offense clicks. Some of the young talent, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, who's a veteran. I think there's a road where Brock Purdy not only looks like the quarterback of a good offense, but looks like the guy in an offense. This is an ultra dark horse, but I do think that the steps are in place for Brock Purdy to make this jump, maybe to potentially, maybe not like the MVP level that we think of, but the MVP level of the Matt Ryan year or the Cam Newton year or something like that.
Yeah. I like the call out. I like that you constructed an argument for Brock Purdy. I don't think there's any chance that happens. Just because of the environment at the top of quarterback play. Like there are so many, are there so many? It feels like there's a lot of elite quarterbacks right now that are like real good compared to history. Like there's a chunk of guys that are legitimately game-changing quarterbacks. And I just don't think anyone's willing to put Brock Purdy in that category. And I think if the Niners are good, it is because Christian McCaffrey is healthy. And so I don't think that people will be able to discern the difference between last year when they had Brock Purdy. They won 6 games. Now Christian McCaffrey comes back and, oh, look, they're good again. The difference here is Christian McCaffrey, not Brock Purdy. And I think everything you said there about giving Brock Purdy credit for being able to navigate all of the different varieties of offenses that they've had him run is totally valid. I just don't think it's to the point where people will reward him with the MVP. And also I'm wondering where these pass catchers are coming from, because as of right now, we're predicting Ricky Pearsall to be better without having really seen the level of production that we're hoping we're going to get from him. And then we've got Jawan Jennings over here. Like, are we good? Are we showing up? Are we going to play? Are we going to sign? What's happening? Are we still asking for a trade? Is Brandon Ayuk coming back? Like, who's catching the ball other than Kittle?
Yeah.
And hopefully Pearsall.
Well, and it's interesting because I was looking through some statistics today, and obviously not a ton of snaps. You're not seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown snaps at like true slot wide receiver positions, but like Kittle's really good when he lines up outside. And never forget, Lindsay, 2023, Brock Purdy, 19.4% share of MVP voting points. Like, and Dak Prescott, 30.4%. So there is a line to success for some of these, you'll have a good offense, but you're not going to make first team all pro. There's a nice line in any given year for these guys. And maybe this year that'll be Brock Purdy.
How about offensive player of the year?
So I think this one is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. I think now that Ben Johnson has left, it opens up the narrative. As you said, it's a narrative award. It opens up the narrative that these players are just really, really good. And I think this becomes the year where it's not necessarily a two-horse stable. It will be a two-horse stable with Dave Montgomery, but I think it'll be abundantly clear that Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy. And he is the guy who makes this whole offense work. He's the guy that people game plan for. He's one of the most efficient runners in the league. He's excellent in the passing game. There's been news that they've kind of been moving him into the slot position as that Saints staff did with Kamara years ago. And I think this is the year where Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe in the aggregate, is getting like 2,000 plus yards. And all of a sudden, he's the offensive player of the year for a Lions team that has gone through a lot of adversity. And a lot of other people, including Jared Goff, including Ben Johnson, have received credit. I think this is the year Jahmyr Gibbs gets credit.
I could see that happening. I like that pick. I want to point out, I think it's notable here that the markets in Las Vegas are not predicting the Saquon regression that many fantasy analysts are. He is the favorite to win this award at plus 650. Chase is plus 800, Gibbs is plus 1,300, and Bijan is 1,500, which from a fantasy standpoint and just a basic, let's step back and try and predict what's going to happen with regards to Saquon. We're apparently all over the map here, right? Because there are some people that are like, whoa, no one's ever rushed for 2,000 yards and then been even remotely good the next year. Like, right. So like there's a lot of people are all over the map where Saquon is concerned. That said, while I am predicting a very good season for Saquon, I think it's reasonable to expect his numbers to come down just a bit from last year. And if that happens, I think that people will compare this year to the standard that he set last year and give it to someone else, right? Like they'll be comparing his like, well, he didn't even do as good as he did last year. So let's look at other people. I think down the list, CeeDee Lamb is a fairly interesting choice. As maybe a value selection. We're not giving betting advice, but if one was interested in looking at it in that way, I think that they will be throwing a ton. We've drawn up that scenario. His opportunity to put up a monster number, I think, will be pretty high. And I think that that's what people look for when they're voting for these awards. They want somebody who's setting the receiving record or, rushing record. They want just egregious numbers. That said, I do think that the same is still true for Ja'Marr Chase. They didn't make a ton of moves on defense this offseason, so it stands to reason that their pass rate might remain as high as it was last year, close to it, second highest in the league. That's a recipe for success for Chase winning this award, in my opinion, as is the fact that he didn't win last year, won the Triple Crown, didn't get a single first place vote. If he has another year like that, voters will consider the consistency, and I think that they will award it. My choice for offensive player of the year is Ja'Marr Chase.
I think that's a great one. And I think if you look at Offense Player of the Year winners, it's definitely safer to go with a wide receiver preseason. You look at Saquon, I don't think anyone really would have been like, that's the Offensive Player of the Year. I think McCaffrey in 23 was one that people really considered. Then you got to go back to 2020, Derrick Henry. And then you're talking about guys like Todd Gurley, DeMarco Murray, which I remember the DeMarco Murray year. No one
Murray.
Yeah, no one would have thought that he was going to win going into
the year.
Yeah, exactly.
That one.
And so I think my dark horse is if you're looking at wide receivers who seem as if their target share is going to explode and they're maximally efficient, like in 22 Justin Jefferson was, in 21 Cooper Kupp was, in 2019 Michael Thomas was, I think that can kind of build a case for Brian Thomas Jr. being the Offensive Player of the Year. Again, super dark horse, but if that offense is good under Liam Cohen, who made an offense really, really good last year, it's probably going to be because of him. And if they win, 11, 12 games, skirt out with the South, even if it doesn't look good by the end of the year, you can see a path for Brian Thomas Jr. to win the Offensive Player of the Year in his second year.
Would it not be, again, going back to the narrative, if they were much better offensively this year, wouldn't people credit that to Travis Hunter?
It's an excellent point.
He's the new addition.
But in 22, you could have credited it to KOC, and it was Justin Jefferson. So.
All right. So those are our Offensive Player of the Year candidates. Defensive Player of the Year, I kind of hate going with the odds-on favorite. but I think that Michael Parsons will win it for a number of reasons. One, plugging him into this defense will lead to increased counting stat numbers. Uh, and this is a guy who already has good counting stat numbers, has historically. We've got 12 sacks last year in 13 games. The sack leader for the NFL was Trey Hendrickson, who had 17 and a half in 17 games. There is no doubt for me that Parsons being the sack leader in this defense in Green Bay is in the cards. And we know that voters prioritize stats like that one. But also the other guy's likely to be at the top of that particular list, which I think is overweighted in this voting. People love rewarding sack leaders. Hendrickson, Garrett, TJ Watt. I think there's a chance that a lot of the guys that are at the top of this list are on teams that are not very good. And I think people want players that win these awards to be difference makers to the degree, ideally, that they're leading to wins for their teams. And so that's an easy narrative to attach to Micah Parsons. If the Packers go from good to legit contender this year, part of the reason will be because he is there. And I think that we will see a Saquon Barkley to the Eagles style bump in his individual narrative. And as I've said 800 times, these awards are narrative awards. So I wanted to go against the favorite. Couldn't do it.
Yeah, I thought there was two clear narrative, makes sense from the position and makes sense from the team being good. I think Michael Parsons is one. You outlined all of them. I think the second one is Aiden Hutchinson. I think if he is able to reach that level of production that he was at the beginning of last season, or even, again, like 75% of what he was at last season, that's there. The team's probably going to be good, and you have the narrative of him potentially being the comeback player of the year, coming back
That's
from
what
an
hurts
injury
him
as
here.
well. Oh, you think you think you couldn't do both?
No, I don't think voters. I think voters split their credit around. They
Fair.
want to get many different people winning these awards, and so I think that it will depend heavily if he's in the mix for DPOY. Will depend heavily on whether or not CMC is in the mix for comeback player of the year. Because if CMC is not, if he does not come back to the degree that makes him worthy of winning that, I think that people will slot Aiden Hutchinson in this scenario in for CPOI. Does that count? Or is that coach? No, CPOI is comeback player of the year. Yeah. Yep. I think they'll slot him in there. And then they'll give the defensive award to someone else.
Man, that really sucks from a contract perspective for Aiden Hutchinson. Like all of a sudden my agent brain turned on and I was like, oh my God, that would be a nightmare. Like, I don't even know how you would do that. Because like DPOY pay, you come in, then you get the bonuses and blah, blah, blah. It turns into a live bonus, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's all these things down the line that would be really scary.
He could definitely win DPOY, but he would have to win it going away. He would have to be such an obvious DPOY candidate that you can't give him something else. It has to be him. And I just don't know. I mean, it's possible that scenario presents itself where no one else is in this conversation and it's clearly him. He's definitely good enough to make that case. But I think that's the case that's going to need to exist, because if it's close, that voters will just start splitting people off.
100%. I think that makes a lot of sense. With regards to like dark horses here, I don't really have a dark horse because they're all kind of dark horses behind Mike Parsons. Aiden Hutchinson, obviously you could talk about Garrett or Watt or Bosa. I wouldn't really consider them dark horses, even though the odds do.
No.
Something that I found really interesting is that Jared Verse is like 7th in these odds for Defensive Player of the Year.
Why
I don't
is
really
that interesting?
know.
Why?
Why is he that high?
What do you mean?
Yeah, like he just didn't maintain that level of production last year. Like I viewed him more as like a breakout guy last year, and maybe he gets it together this year. I'd like to do an analysis of his like pressures versus what we would have expected his sacks to be. But like, given how that defense typically operates, given that he's more of a power rusher who, really maintains pushing the pocket, and thus sometimes the sacks go to guys like Braden Fisk, Byron Young, Kobe Turner. I just like don't see the numbers adding up to really contest with some of these guys who are more veteran style pass rushers, and the defense is completely structured around him, like a Max Crosby, a Trey Hendrickson, or some of these other guys. I just feel like at plus 1,500, the 7th best odds to win Defense Player of the Year. Obviously, it's always good odds if it's, like a Defense Player of the Year long shot. But I just don't see the value as compared to 1,600 Max Crosby, for
Yeah,
example.
I can see that point. I can see that point for sure. I think the way that I see him and that number is more less I want to bet that number he's going to win this award and more his status will rise. And I think
I
it
can
will.
100% get down with that. This was a very nerdy betting thing that I was like, seventh best odds. Like, wow, that seems really high.
Yeah, that you might be right. You might be right. Offensive rookie of the year. Let's get to the rooks.
Ooh, okay. So this one is tough, and it really puts in perspective, I think, the hold that fantasy has on us. Because, like,
Uh-huh.
what was this? This was the meat and potatoes draft. Like, it could totally be that there is a legit
Oh, that's right.
rookie all
Didn't
pro.
even consider that. Literally didn't even
Yeah,
consider like some tackle or oh, that's so funny.
like
Yeah.
legitimately, the Seahawks could have the best rushing offense in the league. And
Right.
Gray's Abel could make the
No
all pro team as a rookie, and he ain't winning
chance.
this award. There's
100% no.
there's no chance. And
That's a
so
very good point.
I'm like, the first step I went to try to consider this award was to, like, go to the draft. I'm like, oh, Will Campbell's good. Like, oh, that could make sense. And then I'm like, wait, hold up. That doesn't make any sense. Like, this is a fantasy award, basically. So I have to stick with the number one pick, Cam Ward. I think if this offense is even a semblance of good, which they do have a pretty decent compilation of offensive linemen from several different spots, which is more to say than most teams. If that kind of pieces itself together, I think Cam Ward probably does walk away with this award. I'm also interested in Tedero McMillan. I think if the Panthers offense makes a jump and Bryce Young looks really good, a lot of that credit could go to Tedero McMillan. I just think there's way too many running backs in the top of this in the top of these odds. It's just so hard to predict those running backs that, like, I just don't know if Marion Hampton's going to get enough carries to be a top tier guy. It's kind of similar with Trevion Henderson, RJ Harvey. I think really the only one, if you're looking to bet a running back, would be Ashton Genty. And I just don't know if he's going to produce at the level of some of these top tier running backs that we really kind of highlight.
Same. If you want to win these awards, again, narrative, I keep banging that drum, but also or insane stats, right? And while I think Ashton Genty is going to be incredible, I'm worried about his ability as a running back to post really impressive numbers on a team that the market doesn't think is going to win that many games. The Raiders have a win total of 6.5 games. There are only 5 teams with lower win totals than that. And while I can absolutely, as I've stated already, get on board with them overplaying that hand, the question is how much more? And if they lose more than they win, how much are they able to run the ball? Now, Tedero McMillan's team also has a 6.5 win total, but in my mind, that actually gives a wide receiver 2 paths to winning this award. Either that's the number of games that they win, and therefore they're which in this case is not very many, and therefore they're throwing a ton. And he's a clear wide receiver 1 in the offense that gets a lot of targets. It can get that receiving yardage number way up. Or they turn out to be better than that total, surprising people along the way and getting attention for that. And guess who's the new piece there that's going to get credit for pulling it all together? Plus, we don't do betting advice here again, but simple math suggests that a viable option with plus 1,200 odds is a better value than a guy at plus 250. So Tedero McMillan, I like in a lot of different ways for this award.
Right, 100%. Just one more piece on Ashton Genty now that I'm thinking about it. Bring in a new offense coordinator, Chip Kelly. What was the MO on Chip Kelly at Ohio State last year? They legitimately had brought in Quinshad Junkins, despite having Trevion Henderson as the number 1 running back. I think you got to consider that a little bit of whether they do add in, a little bit more stable running back just to keep Ashton Genty fresh as the season goes on.
Oh my God, please don't do that. Like for so many reasons. Although I have 0 shares of Ashton Genty in fantasy because of where he's going. So I am not personally invested in them not doing that, but I just don't want to see them do that. I don't think anybody does. Like let him cook. Let him be good. I think we all want it to go in that direction. What about the defensive rookie of the year? I will tell you this. I came up with the name, but I really struggled. Like, I really struggled for this one. And partially that's because I'm so familiar because of fantasy of all of the different offensive weapons. And then the focus on the defensive pieces at this time of year just isn't as great. So I haven't spent as much time thinking about these guys and who's going to have the path to check all the boxes that we've suggested are necessary to win an award like this. I will say this before we get to names. There is a pattern with Defensive Rookie of the Year. It usually is a high draft pick, usually top 20, but every single one since 1989 has been a top 40 pick. So we're the field feels a little bit smaller there. It is unlikely and historically does not happen for people to just, a low round pick just gets plugged in and outplays that. And then all of a sudden they're the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Pass rushers have the edge in this, particularly lately. 5 of the last 6 winners of this award have been edge rushers. Players on good teams have an edge for this award. 7 of the last 10 winners of this award have made the playoffs that year. And then obviously, as we've talked about for DPOY, high sack or interception totals, but primarily sack, frankly, those are sort of necessary here. Maybe get some hits and pressures and hurries and get those numbers up, but it needs to be somebody who contributes in a way where we can actually count up the ways that they helped.
That makes a lot of sense. That was the way that I kind of approached it as well, which was like, from the data perspective, which one of these guys do we think is going to be really good? The place where I get tripped up on is the same place where I got tripped up on during the draft. And I was asking people at the combine, and I was asking people at the draft, and I was asking a million people, like, how do we know which edge rusher is actually better? So if you're just going for, the value or you want to be correct, Abdul Carter would obviously be the selection as the far and away top non-quarterback in this draft, for as most people viewed it, outside of Travis Hunter, who's like, I'm going to not consider him as a defensive player for all intents and purposes right now. The question I have is like, how many snaps is he really going to get? Like, he could have an immense impact and be an excellent selection and still like split snaps with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. And I'm sure they're going to figure out ways to get all 3, 4, if you're considering Dexter Lawrence as well, of those guys on the field at the same time. I just do consider that there are extra pieces on that depth chart that there aren't in other places, for example. So I don't think this is my selection per se, but I will certifiably say I think this is coming from the deep edge class that we saw in the first round. I think the best value is James Pierce. I think he's going to play a bazillion snaps all year. Whether those snaps look great or not, I don't know. But I think this could end up being like kind of like the Vic Beasley year, where Vic Beasley just had a ton of sacks and all of a sudden was in consideration for Defense Player of the Year. I think there is kind of a path to success in that manner for James Pierce, who I think will just be standing on the edge. I think they're going to be in a lot of tight games. Teams will be throwing against him. All of a sudden, you see him have 10 or 11 sacks. That could lead to a Defensive Rookie of the Year award for James Pierce.
Do you think that there's any chance that like Jalen Walker, who we're also expecting to be good, hoping, right? In a best case scenario here, the Falcons get a lot better because both of those picks hit. Do you think they cancel each other out?
I think it's just tough. He would have to be used in a role like Micah Parsons was in his rookie year, where he was still kind of like a pseudo linebacker getting moved around a lot. We haven't really seen a true inside linebacker, which I'm not saying Jalen Walker will necessarily play, but we haven't seen a true inside linebacker since Kuechly in 2012. And then there's like this long list in the late 2000s of Brian Cushing, Gerard Mayo, Patrick Willis, D'Amico Ryans.
Shaq Leonard, maybe.
Shaq Leonard too, but Shaq Leonard as literally probably my favorite player of all time. Like obsessed with at the time Darius Leonard. Like literally crafted my entire game off of him. Had like a year where he had like 10 turnovers. And that's like the most roll of the dice thing ever. He had like 5 picks and a ton of fumble recoveries and even more forced fumbles. Like that was such an insane year from him. I just don't see anyone recreating that in the modern NFL.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that Jalen Walker will. I'm just wondering if people who are paying attention to the Falcons will consider the contributions of both of them within the defense and kind of, I don't know, just alter their voting in that sense. Like, because narratively, it's not like James Pierce, look what he did to make it better. I kind of think that the same thing might be true with Mike Green and Malachi Starks. I think both of them are set up to, like, I mean, it's the Ravens, for crying out loud, right? Like, you walk in, you have success. Like, they probably will be very good. But
it's interesting because, like, even I went and looked at our Sumer scores for FAI, and like a lot of these players were good. But that was kind of the rub going into the draft. It was like, there's a lot of good edge rushers. There's a lot of
Yeah.
good defense players in this draft. So it's interesting how it's kind of stuck. I guess like some other notable things, like if all of a sudden the Browns are in playoff contention and Carson Swessinger turns into like the second coming of Luke
But
Kuechly,
did
that
you
could
just
be interesting.
what
But
what
like,
kind of what ifs are we playing with here?
we're
Like,
playing
what are
with
we
big what
doing?
ifs.
That's not a that's
If is being thrown around a lot. Like there's all kinds of stuff that could happen. I think that's like the third item that could all of a sudden like be interesting, I suppose.
what about Michael Williams opposite Nick Bosa? He's more of a run stopper in terms of strengths, so that won't give him the counting stats. And even if he really changes things around on the defense, like for the defense, it probably won't lead to the type of production that people notice necessarily for this. Will Johnson. Will Johnson's another one that I think is interesting. We talked about the Cardinals maybe being a little bit underrated if they are a team that some of the parts actually does come together this year and they do get a lot better. Then you could point to, I think they've got a lot of really interesting pieces, frankly, in their defensive backfield. I just wonder if they got better enough with regards to their pass rush that the numbers will be there, right? Like you can only cover for so long. And I don't know. So I kind of like him. I like the spot for him. All of this is to say that for me, it just goes back to Abdul Carter. And I tried so hard. To go in a different direction. But I just feel like because of all of the different kind of potential knocks that I've suggested that might disincentivize somebody from voting for any of these other people, I think Abdul Carter, he's in an environment where there are enough good defensive pieces that he probably will be freed up to actually get a high sack total. His pass rush numbers will probably be pretty good because you can't just block him. I think all of this probably leads to a pretty good-looking numerically rookie year for him.
Right. I think the two names that stood out to me as names, and then I was like, it'd be tough, was Jahad Campbell, who I think is going to play a lot of snaps for the Eagles. But again, inside linebacker problem. I think he's going to take most of them at inside linebacker, except for maybe on third down. And then Mason Graham, who, the Browns looked at as someone that they probably viewed similarly to Travis Hunter. And so, Mason Graham was a guy who was like a pass rushing defensive tackle at Michigan. And so you got to ask yourself, like, if everyone's focused on Myles Garrett, he could get a pretty high sack total.
That's
but the
true.
problem is, if everybody's focused on Myles Garrett, then everyone's focused on Myles Garrett. So that may be a case for Myles Garrett to win the Defensive Player of the Year, not necessarily for Mason Graham to win the Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and then also, like, how many wins are we going to get to there?
Right, exactly.
Are we gonna have a Trey Hendrickson or Myles Garrett style year where you're like, we're so good and it doesn't matter because It doesn't move the win-loss needle. Okay, those are all the awards that we're gonna do here. Do you have any names that you're not plugging in here for any of these awards, but you think, like, let's say somebody's going to be like an all-pro for the first time, like somebody who bursts onto the scene in terms of these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about Edge Cooper. I was going to pick Edge Cooper as my dark horse Defensive Player of the Year, and then Jerry Jones had to go and ruin that for me.
Well, he's becoming a little bit of like a mascot for the podcast. Like, his name's come up quite a bit.
And it's come up from multiple people because he's really good. It's just like, now it's like, duh, he's going to be really good. He has Michael Parsons on his team. And so, like, I'm dreaming, Lindsay, of Sunday coming and a big third down. And I just see Edgerrin Cooper and Michael Parsons lined up in a 2-point stance in like the B gaps. And man, it's going to be beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
It gives me goosebumps just to think about.
We are darks. Huge.
I can see it now. I can see it now. And I don't know where they're playing, but one day it'll happen in Lambeau Stadium. The one that I actually want to answer, who is
they're at home,
very deep.
They're at home this Sunday against the Lions.
Man,
are they doing that against Jared?
It's a great point, but it needs to happen. Like, I don't care if Jared Goff is good against the blitz. I don't care if he's good across the middle. I just need to see it. That's how football is meant to be played. Two excellent pass rushers, two excellent, hybrid linebacker guys, just on the tundra, which it'll be probably be lovely weather. It'll be beautiful. Everything is in place for this to be great.
Can we get Puka on the
Yeah.
All Pro list? Can we get him there?
Give me 14
It's,
games, please.
I mean, but then even then it's like, you've still got Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and
Well,
like, how are
yeah.
we getting to that first team? Like, that first team is that's a tough path, right? To like crack that list, because something almost has to happen in order to make room for you to go there. So that's a tough one. But I have Puka and Nico circled as we've talked all off season about their talent level and the ability for them to, how we believe that they belong in that conversation. And so is this the year where they move into that conversation? I could see narratively. God, it's like a take a shot every time Lindsay says narrative on this podcast, right? Like, you'd be hammered by now. Find a different word. But I think in terms of the story behind Puka Nacua, if you got rid of Cooper Kupp and he becomes the clear wide receiver 1 there. Although, you're adding Devontae Adams, but like, I think now we have a 1-2 or a 1A, 1B where the 1A is Puka now. And that's clear. And I don't know that that's been as obvious. It's been like, same Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And I think he's obviously the guy there now. And so maybe if things remain the same, he gets a little bit more credit for the things that he does.
Right. I agree. I think to that exact point of the 1A, 1B, rather going to more of like a 1-and-1, just to go like a deep and back, I wanted to pick an offensive lineman for this because like
To it.
I think that Luke Gedeke, the right tackle for the Buccaneers, especially given Tristan Wirfs is out for the first couple weeks, if we see no fall off from Bucky Irving, we see no fall off from Baker Mayfield, it's going to be a situation much like it was with Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, and then Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, where it's just like, okay, these are two of the better tackles. The problem for that is they have to be better than Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, which is very difficult. So, I'd love to see him make an all-pro team. I think it's going to be hard just because of the level of tackle talent in the NFC, particularly with the Lions and with Eagles. But I wanted to give a shout out because I think if the Buccaneers offense is really good, despite losing Tristan Wirfs, I think a lot of that credit could go to Luke Gedeke, who was excellent last year.
I love the O-line love. Yay! That also strengthens every argument I've made all offseason about the Buccaneers.